My daughter-in-law's scream echoed in the living room like a dry thunderclap, splitting in two the little air I had left in my lungs. I am Eleanor. I'm 71 years old. I was a geography teacher for 4 decades, and today I discovered that to my only son's wife, I am nothing more than an old, cumbersome piece of furniture taking up too much space. I have a secret locked away inside my blue suitcase, one that will change the coordinates of this house forever. I've been living with my son Robert and his wife Claire for 3 years now. So you won't be alone, Mum, he told me, wearing that good boy face he's always had, the one that served him so well to hide his total lack of a spine. Just to lend us a hand, she added, flashing a smile that never quite reached her eyes. That hand turned into the whole arm, then the back, and finally, my entire life. Today was one of those days that seemed to stretch for 100 hours. Since the sun first cracked through the kitchen window, my feet hadn't touched the floor for anything but running from one end of this place to the other. I have 3 grandkids. They are the absolute light of my life, but they pack the energy of a Category 5 hurricane. The oldest, 8-year-old Jake, decided the living room was a combat zone for his plastic soldiers. The middle one, 5-year-old Lucy, ran a fever and threw up twice on the very rug I had scrubbed on my hands and knees just last week. And the baby, little 10-month-old Noah, is teething. He hasn't stopped crying for a single second, wailing like the pain in his gums is the suffering of the whole damn world. By 5 in the afternoon, my knees were shaking. My hip throbbed with that sharp, grinding ache that always reminds me of damp winters from the past. I had cooked lunch, chicken and rice, dicing the onions paper, then exactly how Claire likes them. Watching the stove like a hawk so the garlic wouldn't burn. I had cleaned up Lucy's mess, scrubbing the fibres with vinegar and baking soda to kill the smell. I had rocked Noah, pacing that endless apartment hallway until my arms felt like they were cast in lead. I had helped Jake with his math homework, patiently explaining that if you have 5 apples and eat 2, you have 3 left, even though he kept insisting he'd just eat them all. When the wall clock struck 6:30, I was perched on the edge of the sofa, Noah finally asleep against my chest. The house wasn't perfect. There were toys scattered on the floor because Jake flat out refused to pick them up. A dirty plate sat on the table because I simply didn't have the time to wash it before the baby started screaming again. But there was peace, or so I thought. The key violently turned in the lock. Claire burst in like a storm front, dropping her bag onto the dining table with a heavy, hollow thud. Her brow was furrowed, carving that deep vertical line between her eyes, the one that shows up when traffic is brutal or when her boss looks at her the wrong way. Robert trailed in behind her, head down, carrying his briefcase like it was filled with rocks. "What the hell is this?" she yelled, her voice instantly waking Noah, who let out a piercing shriek. I tried to stand, but the dead weight of the baby and the grinding rust in my joints made me slow. "Claire, please, the baby just fell asleep," I whispered, desperate to de-escalate the room before it blew up. She didn't even hear me. Her eyes, framed in flawless black eyeliner that hadn't smudged all day, swept the living rooms like a scanner hunting for flaws. She saw the plastic soldier under the table. She saw the crooked throw pillow. Above all, she saw my exhaustion, and instead of pity, it sparked pure rage. "This house is a pigsty," she roared, pointing a perfectly manicured red fingernail at the floor. "I work like a dog for 10 hours, and I come home to this dump. Look at this. There's dust on the TV." Robert tried to step in, but it was such a pathetic attempt you almost had to pity him. "Honey, I'm sure Mom didn't have time. The kids—" "Don't give me excuses, Robert," she cut him off. spinning toward me with a fury that froze the blood in my veins. I asked you for one thing, Eleanor, just one thing. Keep the house decent. You don't pay rent, you don't pay for electricity, you eat our food. The bare minimum you could do is keep this place clean. I felt the heat crawl up the back of my neck. I don't pay rent, that's true, but my teacher's pension, which isn't a fortune, but sure isn't pennies either, goes entirely to the grocery store every single month. I buy the meat, the fruit, Noah's diapers. I paid for the washing machine repair just last month when she overloaded it. But in her mental ledger, I am nothing but a burden. Claire, the kids have been really restless today. Lucy was 6, and I tried to explain, keeping my voice level, tapping into that exact tone I used to calm down 40 rowdy teenagers in a classroom. You always have an excuse. She stepped right into my personal space, radiating the smell of expensive perfume and corporate stress. You are so ungrateful. We put a roof over your head, and this is how you pay us. You're good for absolutely nothing, you lazy old woman. Sitting here all day, scratching your belly while we work ourselves to death. The words hung suspended in the air. Good for absolutely nothing. Lazy old woman. I looked at my son. I waited. I waited for that crucial defining second where he would raise his voice and say, "Do not speak to my mother like that." I waited for him to remember who cleaned his scraped knees when he fell off his bike, who worked double shifts to put him through college, who handed him the down payment for this very apartment. But Robert just looked down. He started untying his shoes like the screaming match had nothing to do with him. His silence hurt worse than her shouting. It was a complicit, cowardly silence, the quietness of a man who prefers the comfort of not fighting with his wife over the dignity of his own mother. Right then and there, something inside me broke. It wasn't my heart. Hearts don't break like they do in the movies. It was something harder, like a rusted steel chain finally snapping under pressure. I felt a sudden clarity, cold and absolute. I set Noah gently in his playpen, even though he was still whimpering. I stood up, my back cracked, but I forced my spine as straight as it would go. I didn't say a word. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I simply looked her in the eye with an intensity that made her hesitate for a fraction of a second. I saw her blink, thrown off by my total lack of reaction. She was expecting me to apologise, to bow my head like I always did. I walked right past her, not even brushing her shoulder, and headed straight for my bedroom. "And don't you turn your back on me when I'm talking to you." She screamed down the hall. I shut my door and slid the deadbolt, the noise from the outside world instantly muffled. I sat on the bed, that tiny twin bed that used to be Jake's, which was now my only refuge. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a surge of adrenaline I hadn't felt in decades. I looked around. In that cramped little room, stuffed with boxes of things that didn't fit anywhere else, my life had been reduced to its absolute minimum expression. But then my eyes landed on the closet. Up there, on the top shelf, shoved behind some ratty old blankets, sat my worn brown leather suitcase, and inside it, my get-out-of-jail-free card. I stood up and pulled it down. It smelled of mothballs and closed-in spaces. I unzipped it on the bed. My fingers dug into the inner lining and pulled out a small notebook with a black cover and yellowed pages. It was my old field journal, the one I used to carry when I took my students hiking in the mountains. But over the last few years, it had served a very different purpose. I opened it. Written inside were bank account numbers, not the account Robert knows about, the one where my pension hits and vanishes by the end of the month. No, the other one. The account I opened with the cash from selling the big house, the one I sold after my husband passed away and before I moved in here. Robert assumes that money was eaten up by debts and medical bills. I never corrected him. I wanted a rainy day fund, just in case. Well, the rain had started pouring, and it had a first and last name, Claire Miller. I checked the balance scribbled on the very last page. It was enough, more than enough. And then I touched the folded piece of paper tucked right next to the notebook. The deed to a little piece of property down on the coast, in a sleepy fishing town called Cedar Key. A little house my late husband and I bought 30 years ago, thinking about retirement, that had been rented out to some snowbird all this time. The tenant's lease expired last week. The house is empty. The house is mine. I started packing. Not frantic, but methodical, like someone prepping for a geographical survey. Lightweight clothes, my blood pressure meds, my reading glasses, and a photo of my grandkids that I popped out of its frame so it would take up less space. I didn't take a single thing they had given me. I left the grey sweater Claire bought me last Christmas, the one she only gave me because it was too big for her own mother, folded perfectly on the back of the chair. Outside, the yelling had stopped. I heard the clinking of silverware. They were eating dinner. Claire was probably complaining that I hadn't set the table, and Robert was probably nodding along, swallowing the very chicken and rice I had cooked. The sheer irony of it pulled a crooked smile across my face. I waited. The hours crawled by. I listened to them, bathe the kids, turn off the lights, and finally go to bed. I heard Robert's snores rattling through the drywall. By 3 in the morning, the apartment was dead silent, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator. I dressed in my most comfortable pants and a pair of walking shoes. I slipped on my beige coat, the one with the deep pockets. I checked the suitcase one last time. I pulled the zipper slowly so it wouldn't make a sound. I grabbed my phone and opened the rideshare app. My thumbs, usually clumsy with technology, moved with surgical precision. Destination, the southbound bus terminal. The coastal express buses roll out of there every hour. I slipped out of my room at 5:50 in the morning. The living room was draped in shadows. Streetlights bled through the window, spotlighting the toys Claire still hadn't picked up despite all her screaming. I walked through the kitchen. I left my set of apartment keys right in the middle of the counter. Nothing else. No note, no explanation, no tear-soaked letter. My absence would be the message. I opened the front door. The crisp early morning air hit my face, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was actually breathing. The car was waiting downstairs, headlights cutting through the dark. The driver, a young guy in a baseball cap, helped me heave the suitcase into the trunk. "Morning, ma'am. Up early or out late?" he asked with a polite smile as I slid into the back seat. I looked up at the third-floor window. It was pitch black. Up there, my son and his wife were fast asleep, completely certain that when they woke up, breakfast would be hot on the stove and the useless old woman would be ready to scrub away their misery. They had absolutely no clue that the chef, the nanny, the maid, and their personal emotional punching bag had just handed in her irrevocable resignation. "Neither one, son," I replied, feeling an ancient heavy power waking up in my chest. "I'm breaking out of prison." The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror and grinned. He put it in drive, and we drifted down the empty avenue. As the concrete spine of the city faded away behind us, I pulled out my black notebook and traced my thumb over the paper. I pictured the ocean, I pictured the salt on my skin, I pictured the silence. But mostly I pictured Claire's face when she rolled out of bed in 2 hours and discovered that the lazy old woman had taken something a lot more valuable than her clothes. She had taken away their comfort. The journey was just beginning. And I, Eleanor, the retired geography teacher, was about to completely redraw the map of my own existence. The interstate bus smelled like cheap coffee and pine cleaner, a mix that would normally turn my stomach, but today it smelled exactly like freedom. I sat by the window on the shady side, watching the grey, suffocating urban sprawl shrink and vanish, swallowed up by the deep green pine trees that line the highway heading down to the coast. At 71, with knees that protested against the damp air and a heart beating with a ferocity I thought I'd lost forever, I felt like a fugitive right out of an action movie. Only my weapon wasn't a gun. It was a gold debit card tucked safely inside my bra. For the entire 4-hour ride, I never once closed my eyes. Like a good geography teacher, I studied the terrain. I watched the topography shift from choked, smoggy valleys to the wide-open flatlands that announce the ocean is near. Every single mile marker I put between my daughter-in-law, Claire, and myself was 100 pounds lifted off my shoulders. I imagined the sheer chaos going down in that apartment right at that very second. It would be 8 in the morning. Claire would be tearing the place apart, looking for Jake's gym socks. Baby Noah would be screaming his lungs out because no one had mashed his banana to the exact smooth consistency only I know how to get right. And Robert would be staring at his watch, realising he was going to be late for work, entirely paralysed by the absence of his mother, the useless one. When I stepped off the bus at the Cedar Key terminal, the heavy wall of humid, salty heat wrapped around me like an old friend's embrace. The town had changed it a bit in the 3 years I'd been gone, held hostage by my grandmotherly duties, but the soul of it was exactly the same. The hum of the golf carts, the locals selling fresh fruit from truck beds, and that slow, deliberate rhythm that only exists in places where the tides dictate the time. The very first thing I did wasn't heading to the house. I went to the bank. I needed to touch reality with my own 2 hands. I walked in to the tiny branch right across from the town square. The AC was humming and the white tile floors were spotless. I approached the ATM with a completely irrational spike of fear. What if the bank had gone under? What if my memory had scrambled the pin? My fingers, which had trembled so many times serving Claire her soup, terrified of spilling a drop on her tablecloth, now punched the keypad with absolute authority. Check balance. The screen blinked for a second that felt like a century, and there it was, the number. The cash from selling the big house, plus compound interest, plus the rent the property management company had been religiously depositing month after month. It was a serious amount of money. I wasn't yacht money rich. I wasn't buying absurd luxury. But I was a woman rich in options. I could hire private nurses. I could pay for cabs. I could eat out at a restaurant every single day if I felt like it. I could buy Claire's arrogance outright and hand it back to her wrapped in a bow. I printed the receipt just for the sheer visceral thrill of holding it. I folded it neatly and slipped it next to my black notebook. I walked out of that bank with my chin held high. A guy selling scratch-off tickets posted up on the corner caught my eye. "Buy a ticket, ma'am. Change your luck today," he said, flashing a toothless grin. I bought a $20 ticket without blinking. "My luck already changed, honey. This is just for sport," I told him, leaving him a tip that made his eyes bug out of his head. I walked the 4 blocks to my house. My property is a simple white clapboard siding, a tin roof and a wide wraparound porch where I used to sit with my husband and watch the afternoons bleed away. The paint on the picket fence was peeling and the front yard was a jungle of weeds, but it was mine. I pulled out the set of keys I had guarded like a holy relic at the bottom of my suitcase. The key turned smooth as silk, offering zero resistance, like the house was welcoming me back. Inside, the air was stale and heavy with dust, but beneath the white sheets draped over the furniture, I recognised my old life. There was my wicker rocking chair. There was the heavy coffee table where I had graded thousands of geography exams. And right there on the faux fireplace mantel sat the old wooden radio my husband restored just before his heart gave out. I dropped the suitcase on the floor and let myself collapse onto the sheet-covered couch. The silence was absolute. No screaming. No blaring cartoon theme songs. No orders barked from the hallway. Just the distant, rhythmic crash of the waves hitting the sand. I looked down at my hands. They were raw and cracked from the cheap bleach and dish soap Claire made me use. Good for absolutely nothing, she had told me. The words bounced off the empty walls of my living room. I stood up, propelled by a sudden surge of anger that didn't hurt anymore. It just fueled me. I walked into the bathroom and stared into the smudged mirror. I saw an older woman, sure. Deep lines etched like topographic maps of my laughter and my grief. Grey hair I had stopped dyeing because Claire hinted it was a waste of money. But I also saw a pair of eyes that had reclaimed their sharp, undeniable authority. "Eleanor," I said out loud, testing how my own name sounded inside my own walls. "Welcome to your kingdom." I needed supplies. I headed back out and walked 2 blocks down to Gladys's corner store. I figured she either wouldn't recognise me or she'd passed away by now. But there she was. Older, a little more hunched over the wooden counter, surrounded by glass jars of penny candy. "Afternoon," I said. She squinted, adjusting the thick glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "Holy Mother of God," she gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "Is that Eleanor? I thought the earth swallowed you whole." "Almost, Gladys. Almost, but it spat me back out," I joked. The sheer warmth she showed me was the most brutal contrast I had felt in years. She didn't talk to me like I was a dim-witted toddler or like I was some slow, irritating obstacle. She spoke to me as an equal, a respected neighbour. She asked about my health, about my kids, and I lied with terrifying ease. "They're doing great, just very busy," I said. I bought coffee, fresh bread, cheese, deli ham, brooms, rags, and bleach. But this time I bought the good bleach, the expensive stuff that actually smells like lavender. I handed over a crisp $50 bill and didn't feel a single ounce of guilt. I walked back home hauling the plastic bags. The weight felt exactly like hauling groceries for my daughter-in-law, but the difference was staggering. This food was for me. No one was going to eat the best cuts of chicken and leave me with the gristle and bone. No one was going to whine that the bread was too hard or too soft. I spent the entire afternoon scrubbing. It might seem ironic, running away from cleaning one house just to scrub another, but the psychology of labour is a funny thing. Dusting my own shelves, sweeping my own floors, shaking out my own memories, it was an act of taking ownership. With every sweep of the broom, I swept out a little more of the toxic sludge of the last 3 years. Deep in a kitchen drawer, I found an old manual can opener, rusted, but it worked. I held it for a second. It was a stupid, mundane object, but it was mine. It wasn't Grandma's thing. It wasn't hand me that. It was my can opener. By dusk, the house didn't smell like dead air anymore. It smelled like lavender and freshly brewed coffee. I poured myself a massive mug, black, no sugar, exactly how I like it, exactly how I could never drink it, because Robert complained that the smell of strong coffee made him nauseous. I pulled the old wooden radio off the mantel, popped in the fresh batteries I bought from Gladys, and clicked it on. A local station was playing old jazz standards. I sat out on the porch in my uncovered wicker chair. I watched the sun sink right into the Gulf, bruising the sky in violent shades of orange and violet. It was a perfect geographical phenomenon. And then, only then, did I decide I was ready for the second act. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. It had been on airplane mode since I walked out of the apartment. My thumb hovered over the black glass. I knew that the second that little screen lit up, I was opening the floodgates to the absolute madness I had left behind. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with salt air, and switched off airplane mode. The phone vibrated and vibrated, and kept vibrating like it was having a grand mal seizure right in the palm of my hand. 54 missed calls, 18 voicemails, 102 text messages. Most were from Robert. A handful were from an unknown number, which I assumed was Claire's office line. I started reading, not with fear, but with the cold scientific curiosity of a researcher studying a colony of ants after someone kicks over their anthill. Robert, 7:15 a.m. Mum, where are you? I checked your room and you're not there. Did you walk to the store? Robert, 7:30 a.m. Mum, pick up. Noah is screaming and we can't find his pacifier. Claire, 7:45 a.m, texting from Robert's phone. Eleanor, this isn't funny. Stop hiding. We're going to be late. Robert, 8:15 a.m. Mum, for God's sake, did something happen? We're worried. Claire, 8:30 a.m. You are completely irresponsible. You just made me miss a massive meeting. We are going to have a very serious conversation when you get back. I let out a dry, barking laugh that startled a lizard scurrying up the siding. When you get back? I thought. The pure, unadulterated arrogance of that woman knew no bounds. She still thought this was just a temper tantrum, a quick walk around the block to cool off. It hadn't even crossed her mind that the lazy old woman had executed a master plan. I kept scrolling. As the day progressed, the tone shifted from annoyance to total logistical panic. Robert, 1:20 p.m. Mum, I had to leave work. We didn't have anyone to watch the kids. Claire is furious. Please call us. Robert, 2 p.m. I called the hospitals. I called the cops. Mum, you're scaring me. Where are you? That one hit me with a sharp sting of guilt. Robert was weak, sure, but he was my son. I didn't want him thinking I was dead in a ditch. But then I remembered his silence last night. I remembered him slowly untying his shoelaces while his wife verbally stripped me of my dignity. The guilt evaporated, instantly replaced by a sheet of cold, hard determination. They had to learn. And some lessons only stick when they hurt, or in this case, when there's a total blackout of support. The last text had come through 5 minutes ago. Robert, 6:25 p.m. Mum, we found your keys on the counter. Did you leave? Why? We don't have anything in the fridge for dinner. Jake is asking for you. I brought the coffee mug to my lips. It was lukewarm, but it tasted like absolute glory. We don't have anything in the fridge. Of course they didn't, because the magic refrigerator that restocked itself, fueled entirely by my pension and my aching back hauling grocery bags, was officially out of service. I thought about replying, just typing a quick, I'm fine. But my thumbs froze over the keyboard. No, if I answered now, I'd give them an out. I'd give them the comfort of knowing I was still within their reach. And true power lives in uncertainty. They needed to feel the void. They needed the house to actually get filthy. They needed the kids to cry without a magic fix. They needed dinner to not magically materialize on the stove. They needed to live in the real world, the exact world I had shielded them from for 3 solid years. I set the phone face down on the table. The radio started playing an old blues track. I hummed along softly. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. I opened my black notebook on the spotless counter. On a fresh page, I drew a hard vertical line right down the middle. On the left side, I wrote, what they believe. Underneath it, I wrote, I am old, broke, useless, and dependent. On the right side, I wrote, the reality. Underneath that, I wrote, I have a house, I have money, I have time, and I have the will to do whatever it takes. I stared out the window into the dark, quiet street. Fireflies were flashing in the overgrown grass. Tomorrow, I'd go to the salon in town. I'd chop my hair off. Maybe I'd even paint my nails a scandalous, bright red, just like Claire's, purely for the irony of it all. My life as a dusty piece of furniture was over. My life as a master strategist had just begun, and I had a sneaking suspicion that back in the city, it was going to be a very, very long night for the perfect family. I killed the kitchen light, standing alone in the pale moonlight spilling through the glass door. Tomorrow was a new day, and for the first time in a very long time, the day belonged entirely to me. Let them sweat a little more, I whispered into the dark, feeling a twisted, delicious sense of satisfaction. We're just getting started. The coastal sun doesn't ask for permission. It cuts through the wooden window slats with a hot, golden authority that forces you awake, but without the violent shock of an alarm clock or a screaming baby. I stretched out in the bed, taking up the whole damn mattress, feeling my bones pop. But this time, it was the sound of settling, like an old house resting on its foundation, a crack of pain. It was 7 a.m. In my past life, the one I abandoned barely 24 hours ago. By this time, I would have already changed 3 diapers, cooked 4 different breakfasts, and been on my hands and knees sweeping toast crumbs out from under Jake's chair. Out here, the only thing I had to sweep was a little bit of sand the wind had blown under the front door. I got up and walked barefoot into the kitchen. The cool ceramic tile felt like heaven on the soles of my feet, while the coffee brewed, filling the house with that dark, promising roasted smell. I opened my black notebook. I had a plan. Running away wasn't enough. I had to fortify my new reality. If I wanted this house to be my fortress, I needed allies and I needed repairs. The front fence was sagging. The paint was peeling off the siding like badly sunburned skin, and the yard was a jungle. I stepped out onto the porch with my mug. A guy was riding by on a beach cruiser, selling pastries out of a basket. I bought 2 bear claws and asked him if he knew a good handyman. Go find Hank, lives down by the inlet. Man can frame a wall with one hand and sweat a copper pipe with the other, the baker told me, handing over a brown paper bag. That morning, walking down toward the docks to find Hank, my purse felt strangely light. No wet wipes, no backup pacifiers, no crushed graham crackers. Just my wallet, my keys and my phone, which was still vibrating in my pocket in short, pathetic bursts like a dying animal. I didn't look at it yet. No. First, I had to secure the perimeter. I found Hank patching up a cast net in his front yard. He was a guy around my age, maybe a little older, with skin weathered by the salt and hands that looked carved out of driftwood. Morning, I said, using my teacher's voice, firm but polite. Word around town is you work miracles on old houses. Hank looked me up and down, completely devoid of that rushed, judgmental city slicker energy. Only God works miracles, ma'am. I just do drywall and plumbing. What do you need? We talked numbers. I didn't haggle over his labour rate, but I was ruthless about the materials. I wanted the house to shine. I wanted to make damn sure that if Robert or Claire ever got the nerve to come, looking for me, they'd walk into a fortress of dignity, not some sad old widow's shack. I handed him a cash advance on the spot. Watching his eyes widen as he took the crisp bills with zero hesitation was my first victory of the day. Back in the city, Claire would audit my grocery receipts to make sure I wasn't skimming pocket change from the milk money. Out here, I was the boss. Walking back home, I passed a surf shop. I stopped dead in front of the display window. A pair of oversized tortoiseshell sunglasses with pitch black lenses caught my eye. I walked in and tried them on. They hid my dark circles. They hid my doubts. They made me look mysterious, untouchable. I bought them. Stepping back out onto the sidewalk with those shades on, I felt like I had just strapped on Kevlar. When I got back to the house, the phone rang again. It was the custom ringtone I had set for my son's apartment. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then I sat in my rocker, kept my new sunglasses on even though I was in the shade, and picked up the device. 112 missed calls total. Curiosity, that old geographer's itch to see what's on the other side of the ridge, got the best of me. I opened the texts. The tone had severely shifted. They had moved past the initial anger and logistical panic right into the finger-pointing total meltdown phase. Claire, 9:15 a.m. Eleanor, this is absolutely unacceptable. Jake can't find his gym uniform. Where did you hide it? Answer me. Robert, 10:30 a.m. Mom, we had to order pizza last night and it made Noah sick. He's been throwing up since 2 a.m. Claire is hysterical. Please drop the drama and tell us where you are. I smiled with a coldness that genuinely surprised me. Drama. That's what they called it. 30 years in the workforce, 3 years of domestic slavery, and my exit was just drama. The gym uniform issue was a joke. It was sitting in the laundry basket waiting to be ironed right where I left it 2 days ago. If Claire had ever bothered to lift the lid of a hamper in her adult life, she'd know that. But she only knew how to dump dirty clothes on top of the machine, expecting the laundry fairies or her mother-in-law to handle it. But then I read a text that made me sit up straight. Claire, 11 a.m. If you don't show up by this afternoon, I'm changing the locks. We'll see how you like trying to get your old rags then. There it was, the threat. The incredibly stupid assumption that I needed to come back, that their apartment was my entire universe. They understood absolutely nothing. They didn't realise that my old rags were already here, or that the ones I left behind meant literally nothing to me. I decided it was time to make my first tactical strike. Not a text back, but a hard reminder of exactly who was holding up the pillars of their cosy little life. I opened my banking app. I scrolled to the autopay section. There it was, the telecom bill, the premium family plan, gigabit internet, the massive cable package with every sports channel Robert watched, and all the cartoon networks that kept the kids hypnotised. $110 a month, yanked straight from my pension, because, Mom, you're home all day, you use it the most. My thumb hovered over the screen. Tap. Cancel subscription. Tap. Are you sure? Yes. Cancellation date. Immediate. I also pulled up the grocery delivery app, the one holding my credit card on file for their emergency restocks. I deleted the card. I wiped the account data. I changed the password. I felt an almost childish rush of joy, picturing the exact second the TV screen would go black right, in the middle of a football game, or when Jake tried to stream his shows and got a no-signal error. It was petty, maybe, but it was absolutely necessary. They needed to learn that the magic show costs money and sweat, and the magician had officially retired. I got up and fixed myself a simple lunch. Rice and fresh shrimp I bought down by the docks. While I was chopping the cilantro, the smell instantly teleported me back to summers with my husband, when life was uncomplicated and the future felt endless. I ate slowly, savouring every single bite, listening to the ocean breeze. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang again, but this time it wasn't Robert or Claire. It was Martha, My neighbour from 4B, the only real friend I had left in that concrete high-rise, I answered. Hello, Eleanor. Her voice was a hushed whisper, like she was radioing in from a foxhole. Hey, Martha, it's so good to hear your voice, I replied, totally relaxed. Woman, there is a full-blown revolution going on over here, she hissed, dropping her voice even lower. Claire has been screaming in the hallway. She says you stole her keys, that you've lost your damn mind. Robert is walking around looking like he's at a funeral. He can't even control her. They pounded on my door a while ago asking if I'd seen you. I told them no, obviously. But Eleanor, are you okay? I'm better than ever, Martha. I'm sitting at my beach house looking at the ocean. I heard my friend let out a massive sigh of relief. Oh, thank God. You had me worried sick. Listen, I can hear everything through the walls. The kids are crying non-stop. That girl, Claire, she doesn't even know how to boil water. Last night, the smoke alarms went off because she burned something in the oven. The fire department actually showed up. It was a total circus. The mental image of Claire, in her sharp corporate blazer and perfect manicure, trying to talk down a crew of firemen through a cloud of smoke was pure medicine for my battered soul. Martha, listen to me carefully, I said, my tone dropping dead serious. If they ask you again, you don't know a thing. You don't know where I am. Just tell them you saw me leave with a suitcase and that I looked like I was on a mission. That's it. Don't you worry, Eleanor. That woman hasn't so much as said hello to me in the elevator in 5 years. I wouldn't give her the time of day. But are you planning on coming back? I paused. I looked at the white walls of my house, the late afternoon, light pouring in clean and unfiltered. No. Martha, that version of Eleanor doesn't exist anymore. I hung up. That chat with Martha gave me the final piece of intel I needed. The chaos wasn't just in my head. It was real. My absence had triggered the total collapse of their domestic ecosystem in under 36 hours. I decided it was time to twist the knife. I couldn't let Claire control the narrative with the neighbours or the extended family, spinning some lie that I was senile or wandering the streets. I had to prove I was in total, calculated control. I took a picture, not a shaky boomer selfie aimed straight up at my double chin. I propped the phone up on the window ledge, set the timer, and sat back in my rocker with my new sunglasses on, holding a tall glass of iced tea, the ocean rolling in the background. I looked dignified. I looked completely unbothered. I looked like a woman who owned herself. I pulled up Robert's contact. I didn't type out a long paragraph. I didn't offer a single explanation. I just attached the photo, and underneath it, I typed 4 words. Not in the way. The double blue check marks popped up instantly. They were looking at it. 5 seconds later, the phone started ringing. It was Robert. I watched it vibrate on the table. 1, 2, 3 times. On the 4th ring, I swiped to answer. I hit the speaker button, dropped the phone back on the table, and kept rocking, staring out at the horizon. Mom! Finally! Robert's voice was pitched high, right on the ragged edge of a panic attack. Where are you? Is that the coast? Did you go to the beach house? How the hell did you even get down there? I didn't say a word. I just let his anxiety fill the dead air. Mom, you have to come back. This is completely insane. I can't find the car insurance papers and they expire tomorrow. The kids miss you. Noah won't stop crying. Claire is really upset. Upset? I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm against his hysteria. I figured she'd be thrilled. She finally got the house scrubbed clean of my presence. Don't start with that, Claire's voice cut in. She had snatched the phone right out of his hand. She sounded out of breath, and in the background, I could hear cartoons blasting, probably from an iPad, since the main TV was dead. Eleanor, this is incredibly childish. Walking out without a word? We have responsibilities. You have responsibilities. Who is going to watch the kids tomorrow? I have a presentation with the regional director. I cannot miss it. That sounds like a logistical nightmare, Claire, I said, rolling the words around in my mouth like hard candy. And I am officially retired from logistics. You can't do this to us, she screamed, her voice cracking. For the first time, I heard actual terror behind the rage. Terror of losing her status. Terror of dropping the ball at work. Terror of actually having to be a full-time mother and a wife. You're the grandmother. It is your duty. My duty ended the second you looked me in the eye and told me I was good for absolutely nothing. I snapped back, razor sharp. If I'm good for nothing, then I'm certainly no good to watch your kids or scrub your floors. You were right, Claire. I'm just an old woman, and old folks need their rest. Mom, please, Robert whimpered. The cable got cut off. There's no internet. Did you do something? I was just reviewing my finances, son, cutting out unnecessary expenses, just like you taught me. There was a dead, heavy silence on the line. The gears were turning. In that exact second, the penny finally dropped. They hadn't just lost their free live-in nanny. They had lost their bankroll. You shut off our internet? Claire asked, utterly stunned. With the kids here, the kids can read a book. Or play with those plastic soldiers you hate seeing on the floor so much. I am coming to get you, Claire threatened, her aggressive edge creeping back in. We are driving down there this weekend, and we are bringing you back. You cannot live out there by yourself. Something's going to happen to you. I pulled off my sunglasses and stared at the phone like I could look her dead in the eye through the speaker. The house is mine, Claire. The deed is in my name. If you step 1 foot on this property without my express invitation, I will call the cops and have you booked for trespassing. And trust me, the sergeant out here has known me for 30 years. I heard Robert gasp. They had never heard me talk like this. Never. Mom, he started. I have company, I lied, watching Hank walk up the driveway with a toolbox. I am busy living my life. Do not call me just to scream at me again. If you want to talk, you learn how to ask for permission. I hung up. My heart was pounding against my ribs, but it wasn't the frantic flutter of fear. It was pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I felt powerful. I felt alive. Hank walked into the yard, dropping a bag of concrete mix. Afternoon, boss. We starting on that patio wall? He asked. Yes, Hank. I smiled, slipping the phone into my pocket. We're building that wall, and I want it tall. Very, very tall. While Hank started mixing the concrete, I glanced at my phone one last time. Robert had fired off one more text. Robert, 4:15 p.m. Mom, the fridge is completely empty. We don't have milk for Noah. Can you please unblock the grocery account? I swear I'll pay you back later. I stared at the screen. I thought about my grandson. I thought about his big eyes. I felt a sharp pang in my chest, a gut instinct to rush in and fix it. But then I heard Claire's voice echoing in my head. Lazy old woman. I remembered Robert staring at his shoelaces. If I bought them the milk today, they would never learn how to buy the cow. I powered the phone completely off. That night, I ate dinner watching the stars from my freshly swept porch. Out in the distance, you could hear the crickets and the crashing surf. Back in the city, I pictured Robert standing in a massive checkout line at a packed grocery store, dead tired, buying overpriced milk with his own money, while Claire tried to put a screaming baby to bed without a tablet screen to do the heavy lifting. School was officially in session, and I was a teacher with a whole lot of patience. Saturday broke with a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. But the peace of my coastal paradise was shattered at exactly 10:30 in the morning. I was out on the porch, keeping an eye on Hank, who was just finishing up staining the deck railing, when the strained engine of my son's SUV roared into the driveway. I didn't need binoculars to see the absolute train wreck rolling up on 4 wheels. The car, which was usually pristine because Robert washed it every Sunday like a religious sacrament, was caked in highway dust and sporting a brand new dent on the front bumper. They climbed out looking like survivors of a shipwreck. Robert had dark purple bags hanging under his eyes. His shirt was wrinkled and there was a massive stain, coffee or maybe baby formula, splattered across his slacks. But Claire completely stole the show. The Iron Lady, the flawlessly manicured corporate shark, looked like she had gone a few rounds with a blender and lost. Her hair was shoved into a messy bun. She had zero makeup on and her high heels were sinking awkwardly into the sandy gravel of the driveway. "Mom!" Robert yelled, jogging up to the fence. His voice was a pathetic mix of relief and accusation. I stayed perfectly still in my rocker, dark sunglasses on, holding a cold glass of lemonade. Hank set his brush down, crossed his massive arms, and posted up strategically right behind the front gate, and I just waited. "Morning," I said, without getting up. My tone was exactly the one I used when a student walked into class 20 minutes late without a hall pass. Claire came huffing up behind him. She didn't say hello. She went straight on the offensive, like a cornered dog that only knows how to bite. "Open this gate right now, Eleanor," she shrieked, grabbing the wooden pickets like she was in a prison movie. "The little game is over. We are going home. The kids are in the car, sweltering in this heat." "The kids can come inside and get a cold drink," I replied, cool as ice. "But you two are staying on that side of the fence until you learn some goddamn manners. What is wrong with you?" Claire smacked the fence. "You are going senile. Look what you've done, blowing money on this." She pointed wildly at the repairs, the weeded garden, the fresh paint. "That is my children's inheritance. You are burning through it." There it was. The real fear. It wasn't love. It wasn't concern for my blood pressure. It was the absolute terror that the useless old woman was spending the very cash they had already mentally deposited into their own accounts. I stood up slowly, set my sis on the side table, and walked down the steps to the fence. Hank respectfully stepped back. I pulled down my sunglasses so they could look directly into eyes that were pale, clear, and hard as glass. "Correction, Claire," I said softly. "This is my money, the money I made working 40 years while you were still figuring out how to tie your shoes. And I am investing it in my own peace of mind, which was getting way too expensive to maintain under your roof." Robert tried to play peacekeeper, running a hand through his greasy hair. "Moms, please, it's not about the money. It's just the house is a disaster. We don't know how to run the new washing machine. The baby refuses to eat unless you do the airplane thing. Jake failed his math test yesterday because nobody sat down to explain it to him. We need you." I looked at him with a profound, heavy pity. "You don't need me, Robert. You need an unpaid maid, and that position has been permanently eliminated." "Stop talking nonsense," Claire cut in, yanking her phone out of her purse. "I am calling the police. I'm going to tell them you're mentally unstable and blowing through the family's savings. I will have you declared incompetent, you crazy old bat." It was the absolute perfect moment to drop the bomb. I pulled my little black notebook out of my apron pocket, the silent partner that had guided my entire escape. "Go ahead. Call them," I challenged her, flipping the notebook open. "But before you dial, let me read you a little bedtime story. I have every single penny I've sunk into your lifestyle over the last 3 years logged right here. Groceries, 1,000 a month on average. Utilities, 300. Handyman repairs, because Robert doesn't own a hammer, another 200. Private school fees, uniforms, co-pays." I took a long theatrical pause. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crash of the surf and Claire's heavy breathing. Grand total, Claire. I have been subsidising your successful power couple aesthetic to the tune of almost $2,500 a month, straight from my pension and my savings. Without my cash, you aren't upper middle class. You are drowning in debt. I watched the blood completely drain from Claire's face. She opened her mouth to fire back, but nothing came out. Robert dropped his head, staring at the dirt. He knew it was the gospel truth. He knew his paycheck and hers were entirely eaten up by the luxury car lease, the mortgage on that trendy downtown zip code, and keeping up appearances. I was the invisible financial bedrock keeping their entire house of cards from collapsing. Did you honestly think I was living off you? I let out a dry, hacking laugh. You were living off me. The lazy old woman was paying your internet bill so you could ignore her in high definition. But, Robert stammered, you have money? Honestly, I thought Dad's life insurance dried up years ago. The only thing that dried up was my patience, son. The money is locked down, tight, and it is miles out of your reach. Right at that moment, the back door of the SUV swung open. Jake and Lucy scrambled out. They looked dishevelled and their clothes were wrinkled, but their faces absolutely lit up when they saw me. Grandma, they yelled in unison, sprinting toward the fence. Kids, get back in the car. Claire barked, lunging to grab Lucy's arm, but the little girl twisted away. I want my grandma, the 5-year-old cried, pressing her little face against the wooden pickets. I gave Hank a look. He understood the assignment instantly and flipped the latch on the gate. I opened my arms and my grandkids slammed into me, nearly knocking me off my feet. They smelled like stale car air and sweat, but I squeezed them with everything I had. I felt their little hearts hammering against my ribs. They were the only innocent casualties in this turf war. We're starving, Grandma, Jake said, looking up at me with those huge eyes that were an exact carbon copy of his father's. Mom burned the pizza and Dad only gave us crackers for breakfast. I looked up at Robert and Claire over the tops of the kids' heads. They were just standing there in the gravel, utterly defeated. Exiled from the circle of warmth I had built, the very one they had treated like garbage. Come on inside, I told the kids. But my voice shifted when I looked back up. It wasn't the sweet grandma voice anymore. It was the voice of the property owner. Hank, do me a favour and help Robert grab the kids' bags. Just the kids' bags. What about us? Claire asked, her voice barely a whisper, her massive ego deflated like a cheap balloon. You're fully functioning adults, aren't you? I replied, steering my grandkids toward the porch steps. There's a very nice motel about 3 blocks down the road. They take credit cards. I certainly hope you still have some room on your limit now that I'm not covering the grocery bill. Mom, you're not kicking us out, are you? Robert pleaded, taking a half step toward the gate. I stopped on the bottom step and turned around. I'm not kicking you out, Robert. I'm just not inviting you in. This is my house. Under this roof, there is no screaming, there is no disrespect. And above all, the old woman makes the rules. If you want to see the kids, you can come visit between 2 and 5 in the afternoon. But absolutely, no one sits at my table who calls me useless. Claire looked at me with a toxic cocktail of hatred and profound respect. For the first time in 3 years, she actually saw me, not as a piece of furniture, not as a burden, but as a woman with leverage, capital, and the sheer ruthlessness to use them. Let's go, Robert, she muttered, turning around stiffly, desperately trying to salvage an ounce of pride. Let's find the motel. I need a shower. But Mom, the kids, Robert hesitated, watching his children who were already marching into the kitchen, raiding the pantry. The kids are much safer with me than they are with you two in this state, I declared. Go, sleep it off. tomorrow. If you manage to lower your voices and apologise like decent human beings, I might pour you a cup of coffee. Might. Hank slammed the gate shut right in their faces the second he dropped the kids' duffel bags on the porch. I heard the SUV engine turn over and crunch away down the gravel road. I walked inside. Jake and Lucy were absolutely demolishing the leftover pastries from breakfast. I poured them cold milk I bought with my own cash, living on my own terms. I sat across from them, brushing the hair out of Lucy's face. I had won the battle, but the war for my personal dignity was just now drawing its borders. I looked out the window at the ocean. The waves slammed against the sand, completely indifferent to human drama, relentless and powerful. That's exactly how I felt. I had taken back my territory. Now, I just had to teach the invaders that getting into this country required a visa, and the fee was paid in absolute respect. Eat up, my sweethearts. I told them with a smile. Grandma isn't going anywhere. The morning sun on the coast isn't just light. It's a statement of intent. It streams through the kitchen blinds and stretches out across the oak table like a lazy cat, highlighting the breakfast crumbs and the grinning faces of my grandkids. It's been 3 months since I slid into the taxi in the dead of night. 3 months since my daughter-in-law's good for absolutely nothing became the rocket fuel for my resurrection. Today, the house smells like fresh baked bread and black coffee, the kind that could wake the dead. Not the industrial floor cleaner I used to scrub away my own existence in my son's apartment. Jake and Lucy are sprawled out on the floor, drawing maps on giant pieces of poster board. They aren't mapping out foreign countries. They're drawing maps of Grandma's Island, which is what they've named my property. Jake meticulously charts the exact coordinates of the big oak tree out back, while Lucy fills the ocean margins with grinning sharks. Watching them like this, relaxed, completely free from the anxiety of making a mess, totally untethered from the endless drone of the television, proves to me that running away wasn't an act of selfishness. It was a rescue mission, for me and for them. Robert and Claire pulled up an hour ago. This time there was no screaming at the gate, no threats to dial 911. They rang the bell, they waited, and when I opened the door, they were holding grocery bags, not suitcases looking for a free hotel. It's just a regular Sunday, but it feels like a massive diplomatic victory at the end of a long Cold War. "Morning, Mom," Robert said as he walked in, kissing my cheek with a shy awkwardness I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Claire walked in right behind him. She didn't hug me. That would be asking water to turn into wine, but she held eye contact and gave a firm nod. "Hey, Eleanor. I brought those peaches you like, and I brought my own coffee grounds. I know yours gives me the jitters." I smiled on the inside. It was an olive branch. A tiny dry little twig of an olive branch, but a branch nonetheless. The power dynamic has totally flipped. For the first few weeks after my grand exit, their lives were a waking nightmare. Without my bankroll plugging up the massive holes in their domestic economy, they had to face the brutal math of their reality. The luxury SUV went back to the dealership. They broke their lease and moved into a smaller apartment, one they could actually afford on their own. Paychecks. And most importantly, they had to learn how to be parents. I watched them from the kitchen window while I finished prepping lunch. Robert was out in the yard with Hank, learning how to trim the hedges. He was sweating right through his shirt, nicking his fingers on the thorns, but he wasn't giving up. Hank, armed with the infinite patience of an old fisherman, was showing him how to angle the shears. "Don't force it, Rob. The branch tells you where it wants to be cut," the old man explained. Claire was in the living room, sitting crisscross on the rug with baby Noah. She didn't have her phone in her hand. She was stacking wooden blocks, talking directly to the kid, making actual eye contact. She looked exhausted. Honestly, she did. Her nails weren't those lethal, perfect red acrylic claws anymore. They were filed short, painted with a cheap, clear coat. The crushing weight of the real world had completely stripped away her corporate superwoman mask. But strangely enough, it made her look more human, more real. "Grandma, can I put a volcano on the map?" Jake asked, pulling me out of my trance. "You sure can, buddy. But remember, volcanoes are dangerous and beautiful at the exact same time. Just like the truth," I told him, shooting him a wink. I served lunch out on the back deck. Fried flounder, hush puppies, and a crisp green salad. No complicated menus, no custom dietary restrictions. At my table, you eat what's served, and what's served is incredible because it's cooked in absolute peace. Halfway through the meal, Robert cleared his throat nervously. I knew the heavy conversation was coming. "Mom, we wanted to thank you," he started, pushing a tomato around with his fork. "Not just for having us over today, but, well, for everything." Claire looked up from her plate. A thick tension dropped over the table, broken only by the sound of the tide and the kids clinking their silverware. "What Robert is trying to say," she cut in, her voice steady but completely stripped of its old arrogance, "is that we figured it out. We had to hit rock bottom to see it. When you cut off the cash, we thought you were a monster. We were furious, beyond furious." "I know," I said calmly, pouring myself a little more iced tea. "But then," Claire sighed, dropping her fork on the plate, "then the late notices piled up, and the laundry piled up, and the kids got sick, and we finally realised we weren't a functioning family. We were a corporation running entirely on your labour, and you were the unpaid intern." I stared at my daughter-in-law. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't see an enemy combatant. I saw a woman who had been thoroughly humbled by life and had actually found the guts to learn the lesson. "I wasn't an intern, Claire," I corrected her gently. "I was a safety net. And safety nets are dangerous because they make you forget that you have to learn how to walk the tightrope all by yourself." "We are so sorry, Mum," Robert said. And this time, his voice actually cracked. "We called you useless, but the useless ones was us." I reached across the oak table and grabbed my son's hand. His palms were rough and scratched from wrestling with the hedges out back. I loved how that felt. "It's done. The past is a map we've already navigated, son. The only thing that matters is where we set the coordinates next." And our coordinates were looking bright. Not perfect, but bright. After lunch, we laid down the new laws of the land, or as I like to call it, the Treaty of the Coast. They come down 2 weekends a month. They do not come here to be served. They come to coexist. Robert mans the grill or works in the yard. Claire handles the dishes and keeps the kids entertained. I am the grandmother, just the grandmother. My only job is to spoil the kids, tell tall tales, and watch the sun go down. My money stays in my bank account. I did decide to invest a chunk of it into the local elementary school, though. I bought them new computers, library books, and, obviously, brand new maps. 3 afternoons a week, I tutor the local fishermen's kids in geography. They call me Miss Ellie. When I walk down the dirt roads of this town, people tip their hats to me. I am nobody's old baggage. I am a respected pillar of my own little community. Later that afternoon, as Robert and Claire were packing up the trunk to head back, because they know damn well they can't sleep over without an engraved invitation, I sat back in my rocker. Claire walked up the steps to say goodbye. "Eleanor," she said, hesitating for a second, "thank you for not transferring the treasury money when we begged you for Noah's formula that first day." I looked at her, genuinely surprised. "Why on earth would you thank me for that?" That was a brutal call, because Robert had to drive down to the pawn shop and sell his gaming console. That same afternoon to buy the milk, she said, a faint, proud smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. It was the first time in our marriage I ever saw him sacrifice something he loved for his family without you stepping in to save him. I think that was the exact day he actually became a father. I nodded, a deep sense of satisfaction washing over me. My tactical strike had worked better than I ever could have modelled. I hadn't just liberated myself. I'd forced them to liberate themselves from their own prolonged adolescence. Drive safe on the highway, I told them. And Claire, next time you come down, bring that lemon pound cake you claim you bake so well. I want to see if it's actually any good. Her eyes lit up. It was a challenge, but it was also a genuine invitation. I'll bake it, and I guarantee you're going to ask for the recipe. I watched them buckle the kids into the back seat of their car, which wasn't a massive luxury tank anymore, just a reliable second-hand sedan. Jake and Lucy waved frantically through the rolled-down windows. "Bye, Grandma. Guard the map," Jake yelled. As the sedan disappeared around the bend in the road, silence settled back over my porch, but it wasn't an empty, hollow silence. It was a silence packed with absolute potential. Hank walked around from the backyard, wiping grease off his hands with a shop rag. "They drove off looking happy, boss," he noted, leaning against a porch beam. "They drove off looking better, Hank. There's a big difference." I stood up and walked down toward the waterline. The sun was starting its descent, painting the sky in those violent shades of purple and burnt orange that only exist over the ocean. My bare feet sank into the warm, wet sand. I closed my eyes and pulled in a massive breath. It smelled like salt, freedom, and pure dignity. I thought about the Eleanor from 3 months ago, that hunched, aching woman scrubbing greasy plates while crying in total silence. I wanted to reach back through time, grab her by the shoulders, and tell her, "Hold the line, woman. Just wait. The lioness inside you is just taking a nap." I have discovered that getting old is not the end of the road. It is not some dark, dusty corner where you sit in a chair and wait for the reaper. It is the summit of a mountain. And from up here, the view is absolutely spectacular. I am 71 years old. My knees pop when it rains, and I need thick glasses to read the fine print on a pill bottle. But I am the undisputed master of my time, my space, and my destiny. I have learned that respect isn't something you politely ask for. You enforce it with action. I've learned that love does not equal servitude, and that sometimes the most profound act of love a mother can perform is letting her children fall flat on their faces so they can figure out how to stand back up. I pulled my black notebook out of my pocket, my silent partner, my ledger of emotional accounting. I flipped to the very last page, the blank one, clicked my pen and wrote down a single sentence so I would never, ever forget it. Something to read every morning with my black coffee. Never apologize for taking up space in this world. I looked out at the ocean, massive, eternal, completely unstoppable. A rogue wave slammed against the jetty rocks, exploding into a shower of white foam. I am that rock. I have weathered the hurricanes, I have taken the beatings, and I am still standing right here. Polished smooth? Maybe. Harder than before? Absolutely. But I am immovable. The sea breeze tangled my hair, that grey hair I refused to dye anymore because I earned every single silver strand like a goddamn combat medal. I smiled. Tomorrow I have a tutoring session with the kids in town. We're studying the continents. I am going to teach them that the world is massive, endless, and that nobody, absolutely nobody, has the right to tell you that your place in it is a dark, quiet little corner. The lazy old woman has a hell of a lot of work left to do. And man, am I going to enjoy every single second of it. I turned around and walked back up to my house, my fortress, my castle, where I am the one and only queen. Where happiness is no longer a tip I wait for someone else to leave on the table, but a crop I plant and harvest with my own two bare hands. Life begins many times, exactly as many times as you have the absolute guts to hit the reset button. And mine, the real one, it just started. This story and the following commentary are created strictly for educational and motivational purposes. The narrative serves as an educational blueprint designed to inspire personal growth, promote emotional health, and foster healthier interpersonal relationships. It does not constitute legal, financial, or professional psychological counselling. Reclaiming the map of our worth Eleanor's story is a profound, resonant mirror reflecting a reality that so many people silently endure. It exposes how easily we can lose ourselves when we allow our personal boundaries to slowly erode in the name of family duty. For 3 long years, Eleanor traded her peace for a toxic routine, becoming an invisible financial and physical pillar for a lifestyle her children simply could not maintain on their own. The first vital lessons this story breathes into our lives is that love should never demand the total erasure of your self-worth. True family harmony is built on a foundation of mutual respect, not on the silent martyrdom of one person keeping an unstable house of cards from collapsing. When we enable others by completely over-subsidizing their responsibilities, whether emotionally, physically, or financially, we are not actually helping them grow. Instead, we are crippling their innate ability to stand on their own 2 feet. Eleanor's sharp and deliberate exit reminds us that boundaries are not hostile walls built to punish the people we love, but sacred gates designed to protect the peace of our own souls. Another moving layer of this narrative is the powerful realization that it is never too late to completely redraw the map of your own existence. At 71 years old, Eleanor proved with absolute clarity that aging is not a slow, sad fade into the background, nor is it a sentence to become a convenient, taken-for-granted piece of furniture in someone else's home. By reclaiming her independence and choosing the quiet dignity of her coastal refuge, she did not just save herself. She initiated a necessary, transformative crisis that forced her son and daughter-in-law to finally step up and face reality. True humanistic value lies in recognizing that every single individual, regardless of their age or societal role, deserves to take up space in this world with unyielding pride. When we stop playing the victim and step boldly into our inherent power, we actively teach the people around us exactly how to treat us, successfully shifting the dynamic from toxic entitlement back to earned respect. Ultimately, this story serves as a beautiful blueprint for anyone feeling undervalued, showing us that the courage to hit the reset button can heal not just our own lives, but the broken dynamics of the generations trailing behind us. Personal commentary: when I look at Eleanor's journey through my own lens, I see a beautiful testament to the resilience of the human spirit that resides within all of us. We often spend our lives waiting for an external apology or a sudden shift in the wind to fix our broken relationships. But true liberation always begins from within. This story powerfully demonstrates that walking away from a toxic environment is not an act of malice. Rather, it is the ultimate expression of self-preservation. Human dignity is a non-negotiable asset, and the moment we allow someone else to define our value based on our utility, we lose our core identity. I believe that real compassion sometimes requires us to be fiercely firm, allowing the people we love to face the consequences of their own choices so they can genuinely mature. It takes immense courage to watch those we care about stumble, yet it is often through those exact hardships that character is forged and relationships are redeemed. Eleanor did not destroy her family by leaving. She dismantled a fragile illusion of success to pave the way for an authentic foundation built on accountability. This narrative challenges every listener to examine their own lives and ask whether they are standing tall in their truth or merely shrinking to keep others comfortable. No one is destined to be a background character in their own life, and no one should ever feel guilty for reclaiming their peace of mind. Kindness without boundaries is simply self-sabotage, a dangerous pattern that breeds resentment and erodes the very love we try so desperately to protect. By stepping into her power, Eleanor beautifully illustrated that wisdom and strength do not diminish with the passing of years, they only deepen. We must learn to celebrate the silver strands of time as badges of honour and reminders that our stories are entirely ours to write until our very last breath. Let this profound lesson remind you that your worth is inherent, independent of what you can produce, clean, or provide for someone else's convenience. May we all find the strength to hit our own reset buttons whenever our dignity is compromised, trusting that the horizon ahead holds boundless potential. Ultimately, a life well lived is one where we honour our own space, love others without enabling them, and walk fearlessly toward our own freedom.